On today's episode, we discuss with my guest, Chris Ducker, why trying to be a superhero by doing everything in your business will burn you out. Chris's number one tip to focus on one thing at a time until completion, and the 3 lists you need to compile to decide what you should be spending your time on daily. Hi, I'm Joe Horton, and this is Guild of Dads. Hey, you over there. Yeah, I can see you. Come over. Sit down and join me as I'm about to have a conversation about you. A conversation about what it means to be a dad, a role model, and to live a life of meaning. About your physical health, how you look after yourself, contribute to the world around you, and raise our next generation. A conversation that will shape the vision you have for yourself. Forever. Thanks for joining me today on Guild of Dads, the podcast for dads looking to expand and level up their knowledge in all areas of being a father. Tackling some of the most relevant subjects applicable to men, the conversations we have will be thought-provoking, inspirational, and make you laugh and possibly even cry. Covering everything from relationships to health to divorce and death, if it's something you may face as a dad, we've got it covered. I hear a lot from dads that they have all the material things that should be making them happy in 2020, but that there is something lacking, and on Guild of Dads, we're looking to give you all the information you need to really start thinking about a vision for yourself going forward, and one on which you can take action and find meaning. This is a much needed conversation right now, as many dads feel lost and are hungry for information to make some much needed changes and improvements. If that's you, then Guild of Dads is the place for you. Today's guest is author, speaker, podcaster, and entrepreneur, Mr. Chris Ducker. Chris is one of the most influential thought leaders right now when it comes to building a business based around your personal brand, and the founder of the Youpreneur community and Youpreneur Summit, which is held yearly in London. Having featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, Success, Inc. magazine, and the Huffington Post, he is no stranger to the challenges of being an entrepreneur. He's married with 2 children who he spends plenty of time with since putting his days of entrepreneurial burnout behind him. And now for my discussion with Chris. Chris, welcome to Guild of Dads.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
A pleasure. Now, we often talk about all these different things called mompreneurs, youpreneurs, entrepreneurs. It seems like every single day nowadays there's a different kind of preneur that people are trying to get their head around and what it actually means and what it kind of doesn't mean. I suppose the easiest kind of starting point on this is how you think the kind of game has changed for sort of traditional businesses in 2019 compared to what was a bricks and mortar business, say kind of 10, maybe even 15 years ago.
Well, so let's before I answer that question, let's pull out a couple of those things that you just said there, because I think it's important to highlight a couple of things, particularly as I'm quite an opinionated person. It's hard for me to hold back on certain things. So first and foremost, I've got no problems with the term solopreneur. I get that completely. Mompreneur, I despise, and I've spoken to many mompreneurs about this. And the reason why I don't like it is because it's pigeonholing yourself into something that, yeah, you should be proud of being a mum. I'm proud of being a dad, but I don't call myself dadpreneur.
Yeah.
So you're an entrepreneur that happens also to be a mum. I really don't like that term. And I think anybody that uses it genuinely is doing themselves a disservice. I think they're almost pigeonholing themselves unnecessarily to the point where they're not going to attract any other customers except other mums. Now, if that's your bag, continue doing what you're doing. But if it's not, and you want to build a slightly more, broader customer base, you should dump it and come up with something else and just call yourself an entrepreneur. That's my feeling. A youpreneur, which is a term that I coined back in originally, good Lord, probably 2012, 13, and then we kind of trademarked it and made it official in 2015. A youpreneur is somebody who builds a business based around their personality, their experience, and the people that they want to serve, right? So it's people like, solopreneurs that also happen to be content creators. It's public speakers. It's coaches, consultants, anybody, authors, anybody really building a business around their expertise. Why and how the game has changed, now that's a whole different conversation, right? So the game has changed, and it changed, 2 years ago. It changed a year before that. It changed 5 years before that. It's called evolving. It's called evolution. It happens. And there's nothing that you, me, or anyone else out there can do to stop that from happening. The big thing for me now, though, is that I see that people truly want to do business with other people more so than ever before. Fact. We're more likely to buy and make buying decisions based off of something that we either read or hear from somebody that we know, love, and trust ourselves, or through somebody else that we know, love, and trust. And note how I say know, love, and trust. Being liked and trusted ain't enough anymore, because people can smell the BS from miles away. So I think that, as long as you accept that and you humbly embrace that change, you can't go wrong as an entrepreneur in 2019 and beyond. It's when you butt heads with that evolution and that fact that people want to do business with other people. When you butt heads over that, that's where you're going to have problems building your business. And that's why, I use the term P2P or people to people all the time, because I'm a true believer that we are going more and more and more in that direction. That's why these chatbots haven't worked so far. Some people say, oh, I've had great success. And long term, no, absolutely not. So I'm just very curious. I'm a super curious guy when it comes to this stuff anyway. I want to see what the next change is going to be. But I'm almost 100% sure that people will always want to do business with other people.
Yeah. And you can see that in the way things are moving now. People are becoming very frustrated with how certainly depersonalized large companies are to deal with, and how you're just a number, and how when you speak to someone, you're put on hold for ages and you don't get a response, or if you do get a response, it's a kind of, actually, we don't really care about you kind of response. You're privileged to be doing business with us, rather than actually it being a kind of two-way street sort of situation.
Absolutely. And that's why big companies who do take on board the P2P philosophy are winning. If you're a big company, particularly if you're publicly owned or government owned, and you don't take on board that P2P strategy, you do so at your own success and financial peril. Fact, right? So if you've got big companies like Royal Mail, somebody tweeted them a couple of years ago on Valentine's Day. I use this example all the time because it's the perfect way to throw P2P into it. Somebody tweeted them, say, "Dear Royal Mail, I'm very upset. My Valentine's cards has still not arrived." So Royal Mail could have come back saying, "Please contact customer service," cut and paste. But they didn't. Instead, they replied back to him saying, "Dear Paul, very sorry to hear this. When did your mum actually post them?" So you put that P2P in there, and it instantly becomes a fun thing that people talk about in a positive manner instead of it being super negative. So if the Royal Mail, as conservative and as long-standing and as stuffy as they can and have been in the past, if they can jump on board this stuff, then small to medium-sized businesses absolutely can, because there should be more personality in those types of businesses anyway.
And where does this fall into the terms of the B2B and the B2C that we often hear, meaning business to business or business to customer? Where does the P2P fall into it, or is it actually right? We're going to sweep those two concepts away, and we're going to focus on P2P across the board?
Well, yeah, I'm a believer that you should. I'm a believer that you should sweep B2B and B2C away. Obviously, clearly they still exist in some way, shape, or form, but ultimately, I'm a believer that we should sweep them away. And the reason why is because, any business on the planet, regardless of what they're selling, everyone's selling something, right? A product, a service, an experience. You go to Disneyland, it's an experience that you buy. When you're there, you buy all the other merchandise and everything else there as well, right? But you're buying an experience. When you pay for your mobile phone bill every month, that's a set you're for. If you go ahead and order a book from Amazon That's a product that you're buying. Everyone's selling something. So, and who's buying? It's almost always a human buying decision that takes place. Even B2B, someone's writing that purchase order out. And if they have a better relationship with this paper manufacturer over that paper manufacturer, this paper manufacturer is going to win the order every single time. So I believe that we should sweep those two terms to one side. The chances are we probably won't for many, many years, but I don't live in B2B or B2C world, even though I own and operate businesses in both of those worlds. I live in the P2P world, and it serves me very, very well indeed.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying, and I can see how that evolution really does lend itself to P2P much more so than those other two traditional approaches that we've always been kind of looking at and have been kind of distinct when you're looking at different types of businesses and stuff. Now, my dad always used to say quite an interesting thing, and this is going to take us on a little bit of an about turn back to kind of where you started off in terms of how you now run your businesses. What he said to me a few years back was that when he was working in the 70s and 80s, you had support staff. So what happened was, typically if you wanted to get some typing done, you would put it in the typing pool, or if you want something dictated, you would get that done, and you would have kind of support staff. But I think with the advent of the internet, people being connected, most people having a PC or a Mac or whatever at their desk, what he pointed out to me, which was in retrospect quite true in some respects, is that we have all become clerks. And he didn't mean this in a derogatory way, but what he meant was we are all doing our own support staff work, or a lot of us have been doing, as the departments of support staff have kind of been swept away over the sort of that period of years up until the point where moving into the 90s and after the millennium, a lot of us are doing our own kind of, we're doing everything basically. So we're doing the sales bit, we're doing the admin bit, we're doing everything in between, but some of us are being run ragged. And I know you've got very good experience of that, which is kind of what started you on this journey in the first place. So I wondered what your thoughts were on that, Chris.
I would agree with you, I really would. And actually, it sounds just like something my dad would have said as well, if he was still around nowadays to see it. I mean, look, the fact is that we have become, particularly business owners, small and medium-sized business owners, we've become a victim of our own successes to a certain degree. But the flip side of that coin is, to get to that success, we've bought in and subscribed to the whole hustle and grind mentality of working longer hours just to get a foot, through the door, or to be seen by more people, or whole mentality of working 15, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, et cetera, to build a successful business. I bought into it, man. And I hit burnout in 2009 because of it. Hard, real hard. And let me tell you, if anybody's ever been through burnout, you know that it'll affect you in different ways. It'll affect you physically, mentally. It'll affect you spiritually. It'll affect you in every way, shape, or form, both from a business perspective as well as from a personal perspective as well. So no one wants to go through burnout at all. But the fact of the matter is that if you continue to buy in to the hustle and grind mentality, it is inevitable. It will come your way whether you like it or not. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when it'll actually end up hitting you between the eyes. And for me, it was late 2009, and we spent 2010, my wife and I, who's also my business partner, we spent that year ultimately concocting up the virtual CEO plan to remove me from the business as much as possible. We hired 8 people that year. That's how many hats I was wearing. And so, although I can sympathize with people that are in that position, more fool you if you don't realize it and you do that U-turn and do what you need to do to get out of it. There's nothing bad about getting into it. It's just society. We bought into that's what we need to do. But if you ignore it, then more fool you. You cannot impact the people that you want to impact. You cannot affect the change you want to affect if you're burnt out and consistently rolling through this ever evolving cycle of burning out, recovering, burning out, recovering. And I see that happening a lot as well.
And it's interesting you say that, because the trend that you often see with small businesses as well is that they tend to go in very steep peaks and very steep troughs. So they'll get a load of work, they'll get very, very busy, they'll be busy handling that work, and then they'll drop off and they'll be like, oh, where's our work? And then they're looking for more work, and then they go for another peak. And it's kind of almost like the spikes on like a shark's teeth almost. And I think the biggest challenge, I think, for small business owners, if you like, is trying to mitigate those peaks and troughs, if you like, so that it's a little bit kind of smoother. And I think the way you speak of changing the way that you work and delegating a lot more plays towards that mitigation of those peaks and troughs a little bit more, because you're freeing up your time to do the strategizing and the overall running of the business, rather than the kind of doing side of the business where you're stuck trying to do this and trying to do that and juggle 21 million things at once while still trying to maintain your service levels and 101 other things that you've got to do.
And that's, again, you learn by your mistakes, don't you? I mean, everybody screws up. I screwed up. I still screw up. I still make mistakes. But if you're making the same mistakes over and over and over again, then you've only got yourself to blame, haven't you, at the end of the day, right? Yeah. So I think it's just important to realize what works when it works, make note of it. And I was just on a call maybe 2 hours ago. Is an incredibly successful entrepreneur, yet he has the tendency to come up with all these great ideas and he wants to act on them very quickly, which is commendable. And coming up with ideas, being an idea engine like he is, I know we say that entrepreneurs have like an idea a minute, but we don't. That's BS. Let's face it. Some of us are more creative than others. Some of us are smarter than others. Some of us will work harder than others to make up for any deficiencies across the board, right? But the fact of the matter is that if you have an idea a minute and you want to act on them, and you can act on them and actually turn them into good business 9 times out of 10, that's a real gift. And this guy has that gift. The problem is, though, that he's got all these different ideas that have been rolled out 80%. They're working, but they could be working so much better if you just stopped putting more ideas on top of the pile and tick off what's on that to-do list to be able to put the other ideas to sleep completely and then move on to the next one. So I'm just a big believer of the acronym, FOCUS, focus, follow one course until success. And that's what we do inside of Youpreneur and inside of our other businesses is we launch one initiative to success and then we move on to the next one. And then if we have to go back and rejig and relaunch, we do that. But you'll never see us working on any more than one project at any one time because it's just not conducive to building a successful business long term.
Yeah, it's that challenge, isn't it? It's that constant challenge of having to see where you're at and review. And this is where the kind of after action review and tweaking kind of comes into it for a lot of people, which a lot of people do miss in terms of, right, I'm going to get my MVP and then I'm going to tweak it, review it. MVP stands for minimum viable product. If any of you listeners are not too sure what I'm talking about when I say MVP, so basically what it is you've got your idea, you've got your concept, you want to get it off the ground. MVP is your minimum to get it off the ground, and then you tweak it and level it up as you're moving forward. There may be different ways of saying this. I'm sure Chris will correct me if I'm wrong on this, for sure. But yeah, so that's what MVP, and that's what we're talking about here when you're reviewing stuff as it's moving along through its different stages of reincarnation, if you like. So would that be about accurate, Chris?
Bang on the money.
Okay, excellent. So you're in this place where you're kind of suffering from kind of chronic overwhelm, 21 million things that you're trying to get done, and you've got to get this stuff off your plate. What is your first step in doing that, Chris, in terms of working out what the hell should I be doing and what really should I be getting someone else to do for me?
Well, when I hit burnout in that late 2009, me and my wife actually went away for a weekend between Christmas and New Year that year. And we just went to a local resort. We were living over in the Philippines still at the time. And by the end of that little break, that we had lots of these little bits of paper and like bar napkins and stuff like that, with all these different things that we had jotted down over the course of that weekend away together. And it had become, once we started kind of putting them into similar piles, it became quite obvious that there were three main piles. Now, these main piles of little scraps of paper ended up becoming what is now known as the 3 lists to freedom, which was really the focal point of my first book, Virtual Freedom, and building that virtual team of employees to kind of bring a little calm to the entrepreneurial storm, so to speak. And so very clearly, anybody can do it. I mean, you know, the exercise is right at the beginning of the book, and it pops up several times throughout the course of the book. But you just get a piece of paper, you draw a couple of lines down it, creating 3 columns. And in the first column, you write down all the stuff that you just hate doing day to day as a business owner. Doesn't matter what it is. We've all got our own pet peeves. You write down all the stuff in that first column. The second column is a list of all the things that you do every day or almost every day that you don't necessarily hate doing, but you struggle doing them. Like they're not your forte, put it that way, right? So this might be handling customer service emails, for example. Like you don't hate doing it, but you don't necessarily love it either. And it's not particularly what you're very good at, right? So that will go in that second column. And in the third column, and this is the really important one from a business owner perspective, is a list of all the stuff that you feel as the business owner that you are, you shouldn't actually be doing. And that's where the money is. Because once you free up time from the tasks that you write down in that column, you've got more time to be able to do more important things from the business owner standpoint, right? Things like strategizing for growth or spending more time with your top 20% clientele or going to business conferences and networking events to create larger networking, you know, opportunities for yourself, et cetera, et cetera. So you do that 3 lists of freedom, and I guarantee you that will fundamentally become the blueprint that you need to follow in order to be able to ultimately free yourself from the shackles of your business. And we should be looking to be working on our business, not start working in it. Mm-hmm. But so many people are. And that's where, like I said, we have bought into the society of having to do everything ourselves, always on the phone. You know, I'll catch up on the plane. I'll do this in the back of the cab. It doesn't need to be that way. You know, it really doesn't.
And what were the 2 things that you most, did you notice that had a knock-on effect to the relationship with your wife and also your creativity after you started to take stuff off your plate?
I mean, my wife has always been very supportive of everything that I do, and she is very much, an equal partner in the business. She does things in the business that is her forte, that is not mine, and then I obviously do vice versa. So we'd be kind of dead without each other, to be honest with you, from a business perspective. I lucked out. I punched way above my weight, and I lucked out with her. She's awesome. You know what? Did it make things better from our personal relationship? No, not really, because our personal relationship is awesome anyway. And business has always been a big part of that personal relationship as well, which is why I also feel that work-life balance isn't actually really a thing.
Yeah.
If you're a business owner, like your personal life will always get into your work. Your work life will always get into your personal life. Somebody said many years ago, and it was hilarious when he said it, that he did the whole work-life balance thing for 6 months. And he basically had no problems with it when he didn't have any work. So it was like, took 6 months off and work-life balance worked absolutely perfectly. So I don't think it really mattered all that much from a personal perspective, but from a business perspective, it was huge.
Yeah.
And I mean, from a creativity perspective, it was huge as well. Here in my office, I have a whiteboard behind me, which is around about 12 foot wide and about 5 foot deep. And that thing gets used every single day. Like, that's what I should be doing. I should be dreaming up better ideas, better ways to be able to serve our client base, better ways to produce new courses or come up with new initiatives from a coaching side of our business, or how to put on another sold out Youpreneur Summit. Like, these are the things I should be doing as the front runner, so to speak, in the business. And I'm lucky to have a team behind me, obviously, that helps me kind of act on all those things.
And moving on from that creative, obviously we've touched upon the fact that is freeing up a lot of your creative bandwidth. Well, we can see that it's freeing up a lot of your creative bandwidth just from you describing and elaborating on how you're able to really get a lot of those ideas out and onto your whiteboard in order to actually strain them through your whatever your system is going to be as to whether or not they get actioned or not. In terms of the practical side of things, you've got your list, you've decided that there's certain things that you shouldn't be doing, certain things that somebody could do better or quicker or whatever. Then what is your next stage? Is it looking in the local paper to get an assistant in house, so to speak? Or I know your forte, if you like, is virtual assistant, so you don't actually have employees, if you like, at an office as such. How did you go about that side of things, the practical side of it, Chris? Do you want to get involved with a community of other dads who are looking to develop themselves? To continue the conversations we have here on this podcast in a place for dads only that fosters brotherhood, camaraderie and personal growth? Then we have just the place for you. At the Guild of Dads Facebook group, you can connect with other dads on a similar journey, share experiences, offer support and seek support. Most of all, you can get some accountability in your own journey and get involved with the discussions and topics that every dad faces. So look us up on Facebook, join up and get involved with the discussion. Looking forward to seeing you in the Guild so you can start your journey with us today.
Well, I mean, I should say I have 350 plus employees in an office facility. Very few of them work on my online business with Youpreneur. So, I mean, there are certain businesses that lend themselves to manpower, lend themselves to, facility, right? But there are others that don't. And, based on that, question, I'm going to assume the majority of your listeners are not interested in having a big facility with, hundreds of employees and stuff like that. Look, when you get that list sorted out and you figure out, some of the tasks that you want to start delegating and palming off to people, you do have that fork in the road that is going to appear in front of you. You can either A, start doing exactly that, or B, don't. But burnout's inevitable. So really, you don't have much choice at all. You've got to go in one direction, and that's the delegation direction. And I think that we are just really, 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 really lucky in today's world to not be constrained by, geography when it comes to finding the best people for that particular role. And you must hire for the role, not for the task. I see too many people wanting to hire one person to do three people's jobs. That's not how you do it. That's not the way they do it in the real world, right? You don't hire a plumber to do your electrics when you're building a house. You don't expect your roofer to be able to lay your wooden floors properly, right? So I think a lot of the time, particularly in the online business world, we think that we can cut corners. You can't cut corners. Don't cut corners when you're building a business. It's going to be falling apart in a matter of weeks, if not a little bit longer. You don't cut corners when you're building a successful business. You've got to do it for the long game. You've got to play the long game. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to stay in business for very long at all. So I just feel like it's about hiring for the role, not for the task. Hiring the right person for the right role. My number one graphic designer is based in Australia. My number one web developer is based in the UK. My number one virtual assistant is in the Philippines. My number one copywriter is in the United States. You see where I'm going with this? I've got lots of people scattered around and they're all doing exactly what they should be doing to be able to build my business with that long-term mindset. Yeah.
So drop your geographical prerequisites when it comes to hiring the right people for the roles.
If you have genuine personal assistant needs, maybe you're a busy mum or a busy dad or a busy couple that works from home and you've got a couple of kids and you need help with the school run and you need help with homework and you need help with running errands during the day and doing grocery shopping and keeping your home clean and all that sort of stuff. By all means, hire a housekeeper. By all means, hire a personal assistant locally. But when it comes to building a business, no, you don't have to worry about hiring everybody in your backyard anymore. In fact, actually, I try, my wife is always, she's like, be impartial, right? Be impartial here. But I just think 9 times out of 10, when you're building particularly an online business, you don't have to hire locally. You're not forced to hire locally anymore. You should look for the best person possible, no matter where they are on the planet. The world is a much, much smaller place than what it was a decade ago, what it was 20 years ago, and so on, right?
Yeah.
Why not utilize it?
Yeah, exactly. And so picture me, I'm Mr. Tight Ass who can't and won't give anything.
You said it, man, not me.
I'm Mr. Tight Ass sitting here who, or tight ass to our listeners in America, who won't delegate anything to anyone because nobody can do it as good as he can, and also he doesn't want to spend the money on getting someone else to do something he could do and whatever. Now I'm pretty sure what your answer to this is going to be, Chris. But what do you say to this person that they know that they are the problem in their business, if you like, but they just can't let go of this control and stranglehold that they've got over their business, and I'm completely indispensable. No one can do it but me, sort of thing.
You see, you're suffering from what I call superhero syndrome. That was a term that I dropped inside of the pages of Virtual Freedom as well, where you think you have to do everything because no one else can do it better than you. And I'll call you out on your own BS. I guarantee you. There's somebody out there, Joe, that can, other than doing your podcast, because it's your podcast, it's your voice, your people tune in for you and your opinions and your guests, right? Other than doing that one thing, the chances are there's probably somewhere out there in the world that could do everything else that you do, even getting to the point where we're talking about managing your own inbox, that could probably do it better than you. The only difference between you finding them or not is you flipping the switch in your brain that says, I might be really good at this, but actually it doesn't serve me, my business, or my customers properly for me to continue doing this. I'm going to find someone to do it for me. The moment you make that decision, everything else becomes so much easier. The running of your business becomes easier. The building of your business becomes easier. How you work with your customers becomes easier. Your profit and margins look so much better. Your P&L statement isn't covered with red all over it. There's a whole bunch of stuff that comes as a ripple effect when it comes to you just figuring out, you know what? I don't need to do all this myself. Maybe there is somebody out there that could do it better than me. And I trust me, when it comes to micromanaging, dude, I was right there. Like, when people say, oh, I've wore that t-shirt. No, I was printing the bloody t-shirt. You know what I mean? So I know what it's like to let go. But the fact of the matter is that that's exactly what you have to do it. You just have to, if you want to affect more change and build a bigger, more successful business, Now, on the flip side of that coin, I want to caveat this because there might be some people saying, well, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. And I'm happy making a living the way that I'm making it. Hey, you know what? To use Marie Kondo's phrase, if it's sparking joy in your life, continue doing what you're doing. That's okay. If you're not super stressed out over it, if you're happy making whatever it is that you're making, there's no reason for you to make any drastic changes. But if you do want more money, more profits, more impact, if you do want all those things, you can't do it on your own. You just can't, you just can't. If you look at, historical figures like Martin Luther King for that, in terms of the civil rights movement, he on his own was a powerful force. But once he got everyone else behind him, next minute, he's been invited to the freaking White House. You know what I'm saying? So there's a whole bunch of pluses instead of minuses when it comes to building the team around you rather than trying to go to battle on your own every day.
Yeah, I hear that. And we've talked about roles. We've obviously delved into roles. So you found the people that you want to work in your business. If I had someone sitting in the office next to me, I'd go and say, all right, so let's have a quick mini meeting this morning. Let's work out what we're doing today. what's the things that are going to be the top priorities to deal with this week, and so on and so forth. So you can see, anyone listening can picture this in their head, how you go about having like a mini meeting in the morning or whatever, or reviewing how the week's gone and stuff and that. From a practical point of view, how does that work differently when you're looking at virtual staff or someone that could be on the other side of the world? I'm guessing we're utilising video conferencing a lot more and screen sharing and that kind of stuff.
Totally. Yeah. And I'll tell you something, you end up wasting less time with that kind of setup as well. 15 minutes for this person on Zoom, 15 minutes for this person on Zoom, 15 minutes for this person on Zoom, 45 minutes, 3 meetings in a row, three bursts of 15 minutes. If you were to get those 3 people in the same room together, I guarantee you'd all be there for a lot longer than 45 minutes. Right? I know a guy who only runs meetings inside of his facility standing up. Because before, when he used to get a whole team together, it would be an hour and a half for a meeting. Now they're done in 20 minutes. So I think in terms of the online side of things, yes, it's things like Zoom for video conferencing, Skype, right? If you're stuck in 2010, all those sort of types of things. You've got, Slack, which is a great messaging tool. You've got Facebook groups. You've got WhatsApp groups. Slack is really my jam. I like that a lot for when it comes to, communicating with our staff day to day. You've got Trello. You've got, all these other incredible tools that are out there for managing to-do lists, making sure people hit their KPIs on a monthly, quarterly, biannual basis, whatever it is. So I think, yes, there's a certain amount of organization that comes into it in terms of, running and building a virtual team of employees. But it wouldn't be any different if you were all under the same roof. You'd still have to be organized. You still have to have, a corporate organizational chart. You'd still have to know who was doing what, who had to report to who, et cetera, et cetera. The only difference is that you're not all in the same location. There's only one downside to all of this, and that's time zone differences. That's the only thing that can sometimes put a little bit of a spanner in the works. Whereas obviously, if you're, for example, in the United States and you've got an assistant over in the Philippines, there's a massive difference. Or even in the UK to the Philippines, for example, there's a big, big difference. So when I speak to my graphic designer in Sydney, for example, I have to do it first thing in the morning, like 8 a.m. my time, which is 5 or 6 p.m. his time based on daylight savings. So he's wrapping up his day and I'm just starting mine. But these are the things, once you kind of get to know who's at work and when, it's a lot easier to manage those things, obviously. But that can sometimes throw a bit of a spanner in the works for some people when they kick off. And also, it can also be the precursor to people not hiring people in different time zones because they're worried about that very issue. I'm here to tell you, however, that it's really something that you shouldn't worry about nowadays. And the really cool thing is that when I'm sleeping, my VAs in the Philippines, they're working for me. I wake up in the morning to a to-do list with tons of ticks next to different things. You can't do that. You can't have staff locally doing that for you anyway. Not when you're sleeping anyway.
Yeah. It sounds like the two things that jump out at me the most from what you just said are flexibility and focus. In terms of the time zones, so long as you're flexible and say, okay, I just need to tweak things a little bit and say, okay, I'm going to have this meeting at this time rather than when I wanted it, then that is the key to the flexibility. And from a focus point of view, you're not sitting down having a cup of coffee, small talking before the meeting starts, and a few people turn up late because they had phone calls before and whatever. You're straight into the meeting, straight onto the agenda, bish, bash, bosh, on your way with what you need to be doing, either yourself or someone else, so to speak. So, yeah, sounds cool. We've touched upon, obviously, how you actually go about managing your staff who are virtual. In terms of not so much privacy, but also security, people will be thinking, well, how does this work in terms of letting people into my computer system and having access to my passwords and having this and having that in the world of cyber security and whatever? I know that there are kind of ways around this. What are the best ways to handle that side of things, Chris?
Well, things like passwords can be cloaked, right? So, you've got one password and I can't remember the other one that some people use off the top of my head now, name-wise, but LastPass, that's it. I mean, that sort of stuff is pretty simple to set up. But if you think about it logically, if you're hiring people to help you run, support, and grow your business, whether they're in the next room or in the very same room or on the other side of the world, there are going to be certain times where you've got to give people, particularly an online business, you're going to have to give people access to these things regardless. You know, one of the big things I hear is that online business owners don't want to give access to their email list provider. So for me, for example, it's ConvertKit. I'm a happy ConvertKit customer. And, you know, somebody will say, well, I can't give access to my ConvertKit. You know, that's my email list. Well, okay, that's fair enough. But are you willing to manage ConvertKit yourself? Are you willing to go in on a weekly basis and fire off that weekly email newsletter? Or are you willing to build out all of the funnels inside of your email platform, right? And so on and so on and so on. If you're not, then obviously you've got to find somebody that you can trust to go ahead and do it for you. So there's no real difference for me anyway. There's no real difference between whether they're physical or virtual. The fact is that you're going to have to give access anyway at some point. It's just you getting over your micromanagement again, and then obviously not hanging off their shoulder like a virtual vulture looking at everything that they're doing every day and asking 100 questions all the time. You know, that's a whole different conversation. But I think that ultimately, if you want to build a business, you're going to have to trust people to get, you know, and have access to those sort of types of things. I mean, you're smart about it. You don't give away the entire keys to the kingdom from day one. You know, you can do it over a period of time. But, you know, my financial director with our group of companies has been with me for almost 13 years now. Like, she's got access to our corporate bank accounts. Why? Because my wife, who runs that side of the business, doesn't want to have to be in there every day paying invoices, setting up direct debits and doing all that stuff. You know, that she's got. I think it's just a matter of just kind of figuring out, again, right people for the roles that they're being hired to perform, and then obviously building that trust up over time.
Yeah. And I had an instance of this week, funny enough, because my the plugin that I use on my WordPress site to communicate with the media host wasn't, for some reason it wasn't working. So I had to get in touch with the media hosting company, and then backwards and forwards in between them and the web hosting company. And in the end, they said, look, we can do it, but we need to log on to your account to sort it out and work it out and stuff and that. And I had to look at it and say, well, I'm not going to be able to do that myself because I've not got the expertise to do it. So they're going to have to log on, see whether they can sort it out and fix it and do what they've got to do, sort of thing. So it's always going to be that situation where you are thinking, actually, can I really do this myself? Have I got the time to do this myself? Or actually, I need to get someone else to do it because they know what they're doing and I don't.
Well, we recently moved the Youpreneur FM podcast from Libsyn, which is an audio server that we've been with pretty much since day one, over to Captivate, which is a brand new podcast network / server firm run by my buddy Mark Asquith. And I had two options. I could either get someone on my team to do it for me in terms of all of the exporting, importing, because I sure as hell wasn't going to do it, right? So I could either get somebody on my team to learn how to do that and to make sure it all happened, and if there was issues, to fix it, or I could say to Mark and his team, can you do it for me? I'm happy to pay, but you know how to do it. I don't. So I had to give them access to my audio servers on both ends for them to do it properly, to avoid any issues and missing an episode going up at the right time, and people clicking on links literally all over the internet and getting dead episode links everywhere, right? So they went in and they did what they needed to do, and it worked perfectly because they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, and it's just having that confidence to delegate that task out and allow someone to really just get stuck into it when you don't have the time or inclination. I love that word, time or inclination. That's a whole other story that I'll tell you about on another episode.
Yeah, the other thing is that, you know, the big question is, or not really a question, it's an observation, I think, more than anything, is that once you start delegating and you see just how much more you can get done as a result of doing so, it's hard to stop. Like you don't want to do any, like you want to become the laziest business owner on the planet. Like you just want to delegate everything, that's a whole different ballgame, obviously.
I've been on the receiving end of that, and I'm going to reference my old man in that actually again, because when I first started working for the family business, I just used to get so fed up because he just used to throw so much stuff my way. And in the end, I was just like, look, can you just, but again, it comes back to that whole 70s and early 80s where they were used to doing it. They were used to getting stuff off their desk because to focus on the higher value stuff that they needed to be focusing on. And this is coming back. You can see, Chris, this is almost coming back to a forgotten habit, isn't it? It's like a forgotten habit that has dropped in the 90s and early millenniums.
Don't try and say words like that on podcasts. You're almost always going to mess it up.
Listen, we're drawing to an end today, Chris. It's been a real blast. It's been a whistle-stop tour through what it means to be a Youpreneur, how the practicalities of really kind of taking a step back from the doing part of your business and being able to look at the running part of your business really works in this day and age. And I really do appreciate you coming on and speaking to me on this, because I think it's something that a lot of particularly small business owners are really struggling with right now. Although we kind of do laugh about it, there are people in the trenches right now who are just like, I'm so overwhelmed, what the hell am I going to do?
Yeah.
Any quick takeaways that you want to leave people with in terms of the top sort of 3 things that they can do right now to release themselves from the shackles of overwhelm?
Well, look, number one, do the 3 list of freedom exercise. There's a reason why everybody talks about it on the internet, and it's because it bloody works, plain simple. So you've got to do that. The second thing is to, follow the acronym of FOCUS. Follow one course until success. I cannot suggest that any firmer, because, if you want to beat overwhelm, you just take things off your plate. And once they're off, you don't put more on it until you're done with what you've got in front of you, right? So, my kid he loves spaghetti meatballs. My wife makes a killer spaghetti meatballs, right? I challenge anyone to make a better dish, quite frankly, when it comes to spaghetti meatballs. My boy won't even be done with his first serving, and he'll be like, can I have seconds? And we always say the same thing. Finish what's on your plate first. Finish what's on your plate first, then you can have seconds, right? So I think just follow one course until success. And then lastly, this really just goes back to the whole P2P thing and just youpreneurship as a whole. And that is to just be uniquely you, unapologetically at all times. Because when you build the business of you, it's 100% original, regardless of what niche or industry you're in. And because of that, and that reason alone, it can't be copied. You are a 100% original, and original is always worth more than a copy. So, don't even worry about people trying to copy your ideas, trying to copy your style, trying to copy your strategies. There will be people out there trying to do it, but because you are uniquely you all the time, in my mind, you can't fail.
Mm-hmm. Excellent takeaways, Chris. Thank you very much for those pearls of wisdom from the Youpreneur himself, Mr. Youpreneur, Chris Ducker. One last question, Chris, before I send you on your merry way, and ask this of all of my guests. What person or persons have had the greatest positive impact on you during your life, and why?
Man, there's so many different people that have played, I think, a positive effect for me, ranging from my parents to mentors and all the rest of it. I will say, honestly, probably my wife. And I'm not just saying that because she's in the room on the other side of the office here, and I want brownie points, although they ain't going to hurt. I will say genuinely, we've known each other for 17 years. We've been together almost 15 of those 17 years. We've been married 12 of those almost 15. And I can honestly say to you that I'm a better person today because I've got her in my life. And I mean that both as a husband, as a father, as a business owner, as a coach, a mentor, everything. There's no way I would be the same person I am today if she wasn't around.
Fantastic. And I'm sure that will earn you some brownie points and maybe even a second portion of spaghetti meatballs.
It can't be bad. It can't be a bad thing at
Possibly.
all.
But I do appreciate you sharing that with me, because I ask it of all my guests, and it gives me a really it's really nice what people say about the people that have been around them and, who have had influence on them and stuff. So I really love it. Chris, people want to find out from you, what is the best way for them to do so?
Well, you can go to youpreneur.com or chrisducker.com. That's where I live, and I'd love to meet them and say hi.
Excellent. It's been a pleasure having you on today, sir. Thank you very much. And I wish you all the very best with the Youpreneur Summit you've got coming up in the next few weeks.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. It was a blast. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, man. There you go. Wow. There was a lot to unpack in my discussion with Chris, and he really does have a story to tell in terms of how he fell into the trap of getting pulled into doing everything in his business and burning out as a result of that. And I think it's quite telling when he mentioned the fact that within a year he'd taken on, I think, 8 virtual staff to cover the amount of work he was doing. It is absolutely incredible, the output that he must have been doing by himself. But I think there is a lesson to be learned there, because there are so many entrepreneurs and people that are running small businesses for which the lure of being a superhero boss is just so tempting. And, we touched upon it in our discussion when we referenced how the working place has changed, and how some sort of 25, 30 years ago, you did actually have delegation of tasks being the norm. But like we mentioned in our discussion, stuff has come to kind of full circle. So we're all doing our own typing. We're all doing all of these kind of tasks and getting drawn into doing tasks which really shouldn't be on our to-do list at all. So that is a very telling situation that we are in and finding ourselves in 2020. The other takeaway that I took away from my conversation with Chris is why you really need to get comfortable with letting go of a lot of these tasks in order that you can divert your attention fully to giving maximum impact in the areas of your business that you want to, and also the areas of your business that you're the best at, rather than the areas of the business that you can actually delegate out to other people. His tips for avoiding distractions and honing in on your focus tasks and focusing in on that one thing until it's completed is not the first time that a very successful entrepreneur has mentioned that to me. So it's no coincidence that that seems to be something that a lot of high performers make a habit of doing, focusing on that one thing until it's completed. It brings into sharp focus the fallacy around multitasking, but that is a discussion for another day all entirely. The other thing that I took away from my conversation with Chris was the concept of harnessing technology to find the best people for the role. We're not living in 1984 anymore, so you don't need to actually hire people from within your locality. In a lot of cases, you can go online, you can use virtual staff, and you can find people who are based in any area of the world, only a click of a mouse away, a Zoom call or a Skype call away, who can actually do a lot of the work better than maybe someone who is right next to you. We all like to keep stuff local, but the reality of it is, in the modern world, if you want to be competitive and if you want to be having the best people for the tasks that you need in your business, then you may have to go to some different corners of the earth to find them, and the technology is there to do so. I hope you enjoyed my discussion with Chris. If you want to find out a bit more about him, you can check him out on his websites, which are youpreneur.com, chrisducker.com, youprenneursummit.com, and virtualstafffinder.com. He's also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, his handles being @ChrisDucker or @Youpreneur. And you'll also be interested to find out that he has his own podcast, which is at youpreneur.com/podcast. It's available on iTunes and Spotify. And if you want to check out some of the books that Chris has written around the subject of the Youpreneur concept, you can check those out on his Amazon book page. So those are all the different areas that you can find Chris on the internet. And obviously, if you want to check out any of the information that we've referred to in the episode today, those will be on our website, which is guildofdads.com. If you want to hear more discussions just like this one today, the best way to do it is by subscribing on your podcast player of choice, be that iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. If you subscribe, then you will get to find out the podcast episodes that are coming up each week. They'll just pop up on your podcast player of choice. So that is the best way to hear more discussions like the one today. You can drop us a rating and review. That'd be very much appreciated. But the biggest compliment that you can give to me is by just sharing this episode out however you want to, whether that be on WhatsApp, Messenger, or text. The more information that can be shared out, it's really important, as some of the information can be truly life-changing for dads that you may know. So if you can do that, that would be really fantastic, and I would really appreciate it. You can get involved with the discussion on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter using the handle @GuildofDads, and check out our Facebook group to join the guild. If you like what you hear and you want to email me, I love to hear from listeners. So ping me an email, joe@guildofdads.com. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, and who you would like me to interview even. I'd love to know. Thanks for listening. If you want to find out more about what we're doing at Guild of Dads, then head over to www.guildofdads.com, and in the meantime, live a life of vision, action, and meaning.